I've seen my fair share of crime scenes, each with its own smell of death, its own shape of fear. But one case stood apart from everything I'd ever worked on. Not because the killer was brilliant, not because the victim was special, but because the dead woman's face showed up again, at the bank, to withdraw every last penny in her account. I still remember that house, an old wooden shack, tucked deep in a foggy valley, surrounded by mountains and a silence so thick it felt like it had weight. The kind of place you'd never expect a crime. But that's where we found it, a bloodied hammer under the bed, and a mother murdered by her own daughter. It was early June, the dry heat of Sichuan, the kind of sun that makes the roads sweat. We were on shift when the call came in. A body found in a rural home in a village called Zhongba, outside Jingxi Township. It came from a son, home from the city to visit his mother. He said he hadn't been able to reach her in days, thought maybe a leak had ruined the roof. But when he arrived, the door was locked from the outside, and no one in the village had seen her leave. In a place like this, when an old woman goes anywhere, the neighbors know. A locked door from the outside, that was a red flag. He broke the lock, and the moment he stepped inside, the smell hit him. That smell. If you've ever smelled a dead body, you don't forget. He collapsed right there, in the doorway. I remember stepping into that house. No voices, no signs of life, just air so thick and stale. It felt like the place had been frozen in time. In the bedroom, a dark wooden bed, a blanket pulled up high. The way the elderly sleep, neck covered to keep the wind out. But this time, no one was alive under that blanket. The body lay still, decomposed, the face sunken in. The smell, a mix of rot and damp wood, was enough to make you gag. Even with every window open, even with triple masks, we couldn't breathe. The neighbor said she lived alone, husband long dead, daughter married off, son working far away. She grew her own vegetables, played mahjong to pass the time. A woman with no enemies, no debts, no drama. No one thought she'd be killed. But looking at that body, we knew. This was no natural death. I've seen plenty of decomposing bodies in my life, but that one stayed with me. The old woman was found neatly tucked under a blanket, like she'd just gone to sleep. If it weren't for the smell of death, no one would have guessed there was a corpse inside that house. When we pulled back the blanket, we saw what was left. The skin had shrunk, her mouth frozen open, eyes sunken, hair matted in yellowed silver knots. She'd been dead at least 2 months. We sealed off the house immediately. It was blazing hot outside, the kind of heat that clings to your skin. And inside, no fan, no air conditioning, just 4 moldy walls, the stench of decay, and a strange stillness, the kind that felt covered, hidden. I walked the house, no forced entry, no mess. The closet? Untouched. The kitchen? No dirty dishes. Everything was disturbingly tidy. Then I noticed something. Every single window had its latch secured from the inside, meaning no one had broken in. There was only one way in or out, the front door. And the son, the one who called us, said that when he arrived, the door was padlocked from the outside. That was our first real red flag. If she had died naturally, say of a stroke or heart failure, who locked the door from the outside? We went back to the body, a plain wooden bed, old blanket, but something was off. Her face had been covered, not with a pillow, but a pillowcase, pulled over her head, tucked just enough to hide her features. Anyone who's worked homicide knows what that means. Covering a victim's face is psychological. Either the killer can't bear to look at them, or the fabric itself was used as a weapon. We called in the forensic pathologist on the spot. Preliminary results showed severe head trauma, multiple blows to the skull from a blunt object. But that wasn't all. The hyoid bone in her neck fractured. Classic sign of strangulation. So, no, this wasn't natural. This was murder. And the killer knew her habits, knew her rhythms, knew how to walk in without a sound. Then we looked under the bed, and there it was, a hammer. Long wooden handle, old, blood on the grip, not the head. The hammerhead was almost clean, like someone had wiped it down. No fingerprints, no signs of recent use. But the blood was real. We ran it through DNA. It matched the victim. No question, that was the weapon. Someone on the team asked me, why hide the hammer under the bed? Why not just take it and run? I didn't have an answer right away, but later, when everything came out, I understood. The killer wasn't a pro. They didn't plan every step. They just killed. Then wiped the blood, shoved the hammer out of sight, and left. I left that house after nearly 3 hours. I remember walking past the old bamboo fence, looking up toward the mountains. The sun was blazing. The village felt calm, like nothing had happened. But behind me, just a few meters away, a mother had been murdered, and the person who did it might have been someone she trusted more than anyone. I still remember that moment when we left the scene. Everyone's head was buzzing with questions. Why was the body tucked in so neatly? Why was her face covered with a pillowcase? Why didn't the killer dispose of the weapon? And most of all, who locked the front door from the outside? That same afternoon, we held an emergency meeting. A special task force was formed. The case had signs of homicide, and in rural villages like this, murder is a ticking bomb. People here aren't used to crime. They're scared. They start doubting each other, and they talk a lot. We laid out the first possible theory. Theory 1, natural death. We've seen this before, elderly folks dying in bed, only discovered weeks or even months later. Quiet deaths, invisible ones. But that theory quickly fell apart. A person who dies of illness doesn't cover their own face with a pillowcase. They don't break their own hyoid bone, and they certainly don't crush their own skull. Theory 2, break-in, robbery, murder, sounded more plausible. We combed through the entire house again, hoping for signs of forced entry. Nothing. No pry marks, no broken locks, no scattered drawers or overturned furniture. Even the coins in a small wooden box by the bed, gone. But the wardrobe was untouched. Shoes were lined up. The ancestral altar perfectly in place. Almost like the person who did this knew that house. And then something froze me. The victim was murdered. The house wasn't trashed. The door was locked from the outside. But where was the key? That's when I went back to the man who made the call, the son. Yes, he looked shocked at the discovery, but his demeanor was strange, too calm, almost detached. I watched his eyes when he spoke. No avoidance, no signs of panic, but also no pain, no tears, no confusion. I didn't jump to conclusions, but I filed a mental note, a big question mark. That evening, we brought him in. No camera, just a conversation between citizen and officer. He said, "My mom's been living alone for years. I work in Bajong, drive a motorcycle taxi. I don't get to call often. I came back this time because the rains were coming. I was worried the roof might leak." I asked, "How long has it been since your last call?" He paused. "Maybe Over 2 months. No calls for over 2 months, I repeated. But you came back now? I had a feeling something was wrong, and she wasn't answering her phone. It sounded plausible, but something in me stirred. That gut instinct I've learned never to ignore. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote down just 3 lines. Body covered by blanket. Face hidden with pillowcase. Door locked from outside. Key missing. Then I underlined 2 words. Someone close. I knew then. The killer didn't come from outside. They came from within. This village, or worse, this family. Once we ruled out the possibility of a break-in, we began to focus on something else. The people closest to the victim. Family. Madam Zhang's family was small. Her husband, Haji Chung, had died 4 years ago in a cement factory accident in Jingxi. His death came with a large compensation, 260,000 yuan. In the countryside, that's a fortune. She had 2 children, a son, Ha Junhong, the man who discovered her body, and a daughter, Ha Wenquan, married off to a town far north in Jilin. Neither lived with her. For years, that house had held only one person, and that is where it all began to unravel. We spoke with neighbors, distant relatives, even her old mahjong friends, and slowly, the layers began to peel back. I remember one old woman saying, Madam Zhang was frugal, grew her own vegetables, raised chickens, never spent a dime on herself, and never let her children touch that money. Someone else told us, both her kids asked her for money. She'd lend them a few hundred, maybe a couple thousand, but her savings? Off limits. The picture of this family became clearer. A widow, fiercely guarding the compensation like a lifeline. Maybe she feared getting sick, or maybe she feared becoming dependent on her own children. Her son, divorced, working as a motorcycle taxi driver in the city, barely getting by, history of arguments with his mother over money. Her daughter, also divorced, raising 3 kids, struggling. And yes, she too had begged her mother for help. A man at the local convenience stall told us, when her son got married, she paid for a huge wedding, but after the divorce, she cut him off. The guy begged for cash once, she cursed him out in front of the whole market. Another said, the daughters know better, left her kids for the grandma to raise. Every time she came back to the village, it was to ask for money. One time, she cried out loud in the front yard. I started seeing the image. A mother, carrying both of her children's weight. But the older she got, the tighter she clutched that money, as if it was the only thing she still controlled in her life. That control created distance. Distance turned cold. Cold turned to friction, and friction turned into quiet resentment. No one in the village believed Madam Zhang had any enemies. But inside that house, there were fault lines. I wrote this in my notebook. The family had money. Then they lost the father. What's left became a scar. And anyone who touched that scar got burned. At that point, I wasn't thinking murder, not yet. But I was thinking of something even darker. Wounds between blood. Wounds that no one wants to admit they caused. And that's when I made a decision. The answers weren't outside, not with strangers, not with neighbors, not even in mahjong gossip. The answers were in the family, and I was right. Because soon after, we uncovered something that stopped the entire task force cold. The dead woman had shown up at the bank to withdraw money, to transfer funds, and to leave a signature signed by her daughter's hand. As we reviewed the victim's financial records, one detail stopped the entire task force cold. On the morning of June 10th, just 2 days before the body was discovered, A transaction had been made at the Jiangxi Town Bank branch. The person who withdrew the money was listed as Madam Jiang, or at least that's what the record said. 36,000 yuan in cash was withdrawn. The remaining 200,000 yuan was transferred to another account. And the account holder's name? Haji Chung. Sound familiar? That was Madam Jiang's husband, the man who'd been dead for 4 years. I held the bank statement in my hand, looked at the signature, the timestamp, the account numbers. Something wasn't right. Madam Jiang's body, based on decomposition, had been dead for at least 2 months. But this transaction, it happened just 2 days before we found her? So the question was, who stood at that bank counter? I tracked down the bank clerk who handled the transaction. He remembered clearly. Yes, there was an old lady, silver hair, skinny, wore worn-out clothes and slippers, said she needed cash to repair her house. I asked him, was there anything unusual about her? He paused. Actually, yes. She looked younger than the ID said. Her build was frail, but her face wasn't that wrinkled. Did you feel suspicious? I asked. Kind of. I even joked, asked her why she looked so young. She laughed and said, I used to work in the fields. The sun made me dark and rough. Now I rest more, eat better. The skin's just lightened up. A perfect explanation, but something felt off. I requested the security footage, but the tapes had been overwritten. 3 months had passed. The footage was gone. We were staring at a door that had opened, only to slam shut in our faces. I returned to the precinct, sat in the cold briefing room, reread the report, and then, like a jolt of static, a question sparked in my mind. Who could impersonate Madame Jiang and not raise suspicion? The answer came almost immediately. Her daughter. I pulled her file. Ha Wenquan. Her ID photo stared back at me. High cheekbones, downturned brows, sharp chin, just like her mother. I placed their 2 photos side by side. And honestly, without the names labeled, I couldn't tell who was who. I laid it all out before the team. If Ha Wenquan returned to the village, murdered her mother, then impersonated her to withdraw the money, everything we've seen so far fits. Everyone nodded. The theory was solid. But now the question was, where was she? We issued a search warrant immediately. A task force was dispatched to Jilin, where Ha Wenquan was living with her boyfriend and 3 children. The door to the case was cracking open, and behind it was the most disturbing truth I've ever had to hear with my own ears. Some cases, once you find the missing link, you know you're just 1 step away from the truth, but that final step is always the hardest, because beyond it isn't just theory. It's a real person, flesh and blood, who murdered her own mother. After the bank clerk confirmed the woman who came in to withdraw the money, though recorded as Madame Jiang, was younger, sharper-eyed, and moved quicker, we pulled every photo of Jiang's immediate family. And when Ha Wenquan's face appeared on screen, her daughter, there was no doubt left. The resemblance was uncanny. To an average clerk, in a brief moment, they could easily be mistaken for the same woman. Only one question remained. Where was Ha Wenquan? No trace of recent transactions, no ID registration, no apartment lease, no bank account activity. The only way forward was to find the man she lived with. Her boyfriend, according to her younger brother, was Sun Hongliang, living in Jilin province, no stable job, had visited the family once last year with Ha and their kids. That name, Sun Hongliang, was all we had. We coordinated with provincial police to backtrace his records. Over 200 matches came up. We filtered by age, between 35 and 45, removed those with legal marriages, eliminated men with state jobs, factory workers, teachers, government staff. In the end, 21 suspects remained. We printed their photos, took them back to Jinxie for the younger brother to ID. He flipped through, one by one. When he got to number 16, he stopped. That's him. That's Sun Hongliang. We confirmed a temporary address, a rundown rental unit in Siping City, Jilin. The room was booked by day, under a false name, but neighbors remembered a quiet couple with 3 kids, moving constantly. The woman, thin, hollow eyes, always in dark clothes, rarely seen outside, always holding a newborn, their youngest. When we arrived, the room was already empty. The bed was still made, a few cheap milk cartons, cloth diapers hanging by the window, a pair of old child-sized sandals by the door. I stood there, flashlight cutting across mold-stained walls, and felt a chill down my spine. She'd just left. No one knew where they'd gone. No phone numbers, no photos. The trail was cold. We're chasing a ghost, I said to the team, but even ghosts leave footprints. And then, one young officer remembered she has kids in school. We changed direction, searched every elementary school within 5 kilometers, filtered for students with mothers named Ha Wen Quan. 3 hours later, we found 2 girls, surname Sun, born 2004 and 2006. Mother, Ha Wen Quan. We contacted the school, got the parent address. A row of low-level flats hidden in a narrow alley. We went in plain clothes, approached like prospective tenants. A dim yellow light spilled from a door crack. Right outside, a woman sat holding a baby boy. Thin face, sharp cheekbones, hair tied loosely with an old rubber band. Her eyes, dark and sunken. When she turned to look at me, I knew that face was a living reflection of the corpse I saw beneath that blanket in Zhongba village. I stepped closer. My voice was low. "Are you Ha Wen Quan?" She looked at me, just for a second, then turned away. No words. I repeated, "I'm an investigator with Wancheng County Police. We have a warrant for your arrest, in connection with the death of your mother, Madame Zhang." She didn't run, didn't cry, didn't fight. She bowed her head, pulled her shirt over the baby's face, and whispered, barely louder than a breath, "I knew you'd come." Inside the damp little room, we searched. An old wallet with a bank card under the name Haji Cheng, an untouched savings book, Madame Zhang's national ID, and a key ring to the house in Zhongba. I didn't need confirmation after that. What chilled me was the look in her eyes. Not guilt, not fear, just stillness. Like this had been planned long ago. As we escorted her out, I turned around for one last look. A woman who murdered her mother while cradling her child. And on the ride back, she said nothing. She just hummed a lullaby as her baby slept in the arms of someone who had buried her own mother with her own hands. The interrogation room was on the 3rd floor, gray walls, one wooden table, 2 chairs, 1 camera, nothing else. We brought Ha Wen Quan in at 8 p.m. She sat down, without resistance, adjusted the mic herself, looked me straight in the eyes, as if she'd been preparing for this moment for a long, long time. I didn't start by accusing her. I didn't read out any charges. I simply asked, barely louder than a whisper, "When did you return to Trungba?" She said nothing. The light above cast deep shadows across her already gaunt face. Her eyes were red, not from crying, from exhaustion. Or maybe she had cried, alone, hours earlier, 1 minute, 2. Then she spoke, soft voice, steady. "April 2nd, morning." I nodded. What happened after that? She took a long breath, stopped looking at me, stared down at her hands, left hand still calloused, right hand once held a hammer. Then she began. I came home to borrow money. I didn't mean to kill her at first. Did she say no? Number she just wouldn't talk to me. So what did you do? I sat there from morning until evening. She didn't cook, didn't speak. That night, I slept on the bed. She slept on the bamboo cot. Not a word exchanged. Her voice, flat, monotone, no drama, no hysteria, like she was recounting a rainy day. Not a murder. The next morning, I woke up first. She was still lying there, facing the wall. I opened the wardrobe, took her ID card. Did she notice? She turned around, looked at me, didn't say a word. But that look, she paused. For the first time, her voice trembled. It was the look of someone who saw me as filth. When did you kill her? I asked coldly. She didn't answer right away. Swallowed hard. Then, I didn't plan to. But when she lunged at me to grab the papers, I panicked. You hit her with a hammer? Yes. I grabbed it from the kitchen corner, hit her once. Then, again. Then what? I got scared. She wasn't dead yet. I pressed a pillow to her face. Then, I strangled her. The room fell silent. I looked at her hands. No tremble, no twitch, just resting on the table, as if they'd washed off every trace of blood. For money? I asked. She didn't respond. I asked again. Only for money? This time she looked up. Because she treated me like garbage. 3 times I divorced. 3 times I came back asking for help. She turned me away. Even my children, she refused to acknowledge them, said they weren't hers. She leaned in, voice lower, eyes wider. I didn't kill her just for money. I killed her because I'd already died inside her long ago. I sat still for a moment. This was no confession. This was a reverse indictment. Pain wrapped in ice. After the murder, she cleaned up the house, pulled the blanket over the body, hid the hammer under the bed. Then she locked the door from the outside, took her mother's ID and bank cards, boarded a train to Cat Lam, wore old clothes, a mask, a hat, became her mother, stood at the bank counter, and withdrew every last cent under the name of the woman she had just killed. I didn't plan to take it all, she said. I just needed $30,000, enough to rent a place, buy milk for the baby. But then I thought, if she were still alive, she wouldn't give me a dime anyway. I stopped taking notes, looked at her, one last time. Do you regret it? The answer came slowly. Yes, but if I went back, I'd still do it. I stood, opened the door to the hallway. On the other side, her baby, asleep in a female officer's arms, barely over a year old, oblivious. And I wondered, when that child grows up, will he ever understand why he lost both grandmother and mother on the same day? The case was fast-tracked. No lengthy trial, no courtroom theatrics. Everything was clear. The evidence, the confession, the scene matched the story. Bank records traced directly to her. Forgery almost indistinguishable. No lawyer could save her from the harshest sentence. The trial was held in December. The People's Court of Sichuan Province ruled death, premeditated murder, and fraud. Ha Vengquian didn't protest. She made one final request. If possible, please let someone else adopt my children. I don't want them sent to their mother's side. No one cried in that courtroom. Her younger brother, Ha Quan Hong, never said a word. We sat in the back row, watching something surreal. A woman sentenced to death, breathing a sigh of relief. No breakdown, no plea, no appeal, just relief. The case spread through the Southwest. Papers dubbed it the matricide behind the mask of motherhood. Some called it the woman who came back from the dead to withdraw money. Public opinion split. One side, outraged, branded her a cold-blooded killer, a disgrace to morality. The other, sympathetic, a woman psychologically abused by her own mother for decades. A daughter so rejected she had to wear her mother's face to survive, a victim and perpetrator of love gone rotten. I, the investigator, took no side, but I remember, after the hearing, a journalist asked me, "Do you think Ha Vung Quyen deserves forgiveness?" I looked at him and said, "I don't serve the court of conscience. I serve the court of law. I've seen murders driven by jealousy, money, passion, greed, but never one so calmly executed, and yet so deeply wounded. She wasn't insane, wasn't desperate, wasn't pushed off a cliff. She killed with steady hands, but her heart had been shattered long ago. The sentence was carried out the following autumn. No one came to claim the body. No one came for the child. She vanished, as if she'd never existed. Only the 3 children remained, oblivious, sent to a welfare home in another province. Years have passed, but whenever I recall that case, I feel a lump in my throat. Not from pity, not from anger, but from this simple truth. There were no winners. Mother, dead. Daughter, dead. And I ask myself, what if that mother had simply said, "You're back," or offered a bowl of leftover rice, a nod, a look that was a little less cruel? Would anyone have died? The house in Trung Ba is abandoned now. I passed by last year. Grass everywhere, rusty locks, crumbling roof. No one dares live there. No one wants to buy it. Locals call it the house of the living dead. But to me, it's the house where love died, long before blood was spilled. There are stories that end with a verdict, but there are others that only truly begin after the courtroom doors close. It's easy to feel outraged at someone who kills their mother, but have we ever stopped to ask, how does a mother kill her child? Not with a knife, not with poison, but with a turned back, a dismissive glance, and years of silence that never ended? In this case, no one was innocent. Not the mother, not the daughter. One held on to money like it was her soul. The other came one last time to ask, and stripped away the last fragment of her own humanity. And then, the children, who never got to choose, became silent witnesses to a tragedy that had been written long before any blood was spilled. The question isn't who was right or who was wrong. The real question is, how did it ever come to this? How does a bond of blood and kinship rot into silence, denial, and utter abandonment? They say family is sacred, but what if one day that same family gets weighed against money, pride, and years of emotional neglect? Does it still remain sacred? Where are you listening to this podcast? In a warm room? In traffic, lost among the crowd? Or maybe on a cold, rainy afternoon? Wherever you are, maybe try picking up the phone. Call someone you've been angry at, someone you stopped talking to, just to say, "I'm still here. I'm still your blood, your brother, your sister, your child, your parent." Because sometimes, one word, spoken early enough, can save a life.